Hi, I'm Hannah Feldman, and it's really an honor to be here with all of you today as part of the Chicago Humanities Festival, Chicago and Evanston Humanities Festival. I've asked by Northwestern to point out and remind all of you. And I'd like to thank everyone involved, especially Maddie and Joe and Michael at the museum. It's really an honor and an exciting opportunity for me to get to talk with IAIN BAXTER and to introduce you to him and some of his work. IAIN is really an important and seminal figure in the history of conceptual art in North America, including Canada, of course. And as you'll see, also an important forerunner in a history and tradition of environmentally concerned and ecologically motivated art practice. So before we start our conversation, IAIN and I thought it might make sense for him to walk you through some of his production, a good deal of which is also upstairs on the 4th floor, and you should all take a trip up there after the talk to look for yourself. But you'll see that these themes of technology and knowledge that we'll be talking about in our conversation really do course throughout the entirety of his career, from the mid-1950s and early 60s in particular to the present day. So without further ado, I ask you to join me in welcoming IAIN BAXTER and to thank him for joining us today.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd like to thank the Museum of Contemporary Art and the Humanities Festival for inviting me, and it's really been nice to meet Hannah Feldman and all of the people here at the museum that I've worked with, and the staff and everybody. And I just got to talk to Joe 1 second, because I need to know which button to push. Because it's a different computer from mine.
Technology is a very important theme of this conversation.
Yeah, I'm just going to. Okay, cool. So what I like to do is just do a quick little introduction to, because it's the way that I always teach. Whenever I go to teach a class, I tell the kids my whole story, and then I get them to tell me all their stories from the beginning. So anyways, I was born in England in '36, and my father got a job at Calgary, Alberta, in the Dominion Bridge Company, and he took me to Canada. So I came to Canada when I was 1. So I grew up in Calgary, and if you know a bit about the prairies, Calgary looks like this at some point, but it also has lots of mountains at Banff. And so as a young guy at high school and so on in Calgary, I was very interested in sports and track and field and skiing. And I got quite, I think, good at skiing. I made the Alberta junior ski team. We skied in Sun Valley, and I liked slalom and downhill and racing and all that jazz. So I'm kind of doing the reverse shoulder here, if you know what that is. And so anyway, so skiing's, and I think sports are really important for an artist, especially individual sports, because when you train, you have to criticize yourself at the same time applaud yourself. And being an artist, it's very much that same thing, because it's a lonely quest as an individual participant in a discipline. But what happened is, by spending a lot of times outdoors and everything, I realized I thought I would like to be a forester. So I got accepted to the University of Idaho in, this is actually like 1956 or somewhere around there, and I was going to go in forestry, and I got accepted on a skiing scholarship. But the summer before, I broke my neck in a car accident. And so that was a real early epiphany in my life to make me realize that it's important to have fun in life and to not take things too seriously, or they could be all over at any moment. So that was a kind of major thing. So I went to university with a neck brace on. And that was a really good experience, because I was a little bit shy, and then that told me not to worry about anything. I looked like a Frankenstein when I was walking around campus. So I started in forestry, and what happened is I realized that wasn't my main strength, so I switched to zoology. So I did a whole degree in zoology. And along the way, I worked with a professor, Earl Larison, at the University of Idaho, and he did field studies in southern Idaho, and in these field studies we used to trap mice, and we were doing population studies. So I have a lot of experience, and very much has been a guiding influence about the word ecology, which is now a word that everybody knows, but back in the 50s it was a beginning word that we were aware of, and I was a lucky guy to actually have studied all that. Because when you study ecology, you get to see everything about life cycles and all the interconnectedness of everything, which is what we're all about today, especially even in social media and everything. And hopefully that will have great meaning for solving a lot of our societal issues. So, and what happened is the professor asked me if I would like to illustrate a book of drawings of the wildlife of the northern Rocky Mountains. So I said, well, I'll try it. And so I did all these birds and drawings, or drawings of birds and animals. And as a result of that, I went to the art department to take some watercolor classes, thinking maybe, you know, I could get into being an Audubon or something. But along the way, I found out about other artists, and there's an artist that was a big influence on me is Morris Graves, who was a West Coast Seattle artist. And he did really interesting paintings about birds and animals, but they had an Eastern philosophy overtone. And they had these auras around them, and I very much liked that, and I became interested in Buddhism through studying his philosophy and his ideas. And there was another famous artist in Seattle at the same time. You may have heard of Mark Tobey, and there was a whole school around there. So that's what really, you know, got me going. So I spent a lot of time in the library on my own studying about art, because I still was in zoology. And eventually I finished zoology, and then I started on a Master of Ed degree. But along the way, I applied for a scholarship to Japan, and I ended up lucking out and going to Japan for a year and a half in 1961, which was really a neat breakthrough for me and an important experience to study Buddhism and to study art and make paintings and be an artist. And I ended up having my first one-man show in Kyoto in 61. And I ended up working on the Japanese Byobu screen. So I did a whole exhibition with these screens, and you'll see one upstairs if you go to the show afterwards, which that would be great. Anyways, another important influence in my career was the artist Giorgio Morandi, who's a really amazing still life artist from Italy. And I very much liked his kind of aestheticism and his kind of focus on just these little bottles that he loved, and he used all his life to create these amazing still lifes. But I realized that I lived in another time, and I thought maybe I should work with still life of my time, which, you know, at that moment in the early mid-60s was plastic bottles. So I ended up working with a lot of plastic bottles, and you'll see a lot of the vacuum forms upstairs. I vacuum formed these bottles into artworks that I liked, and I was able to organize the bottles in different ways. And the interesting thing about plastic is you can crush a plastic bottle and then it looks like drapery at the same time, so it has a kind of a linkage with similar qualities about still life. And when you play with hard plastic, you start to work with soft plastic. So I started to make clouds and things, and this is like this is a cumulus cloud with tartan carrying case. And I made a number of inflated works like that. Also at this same moment, because I'd been, you know, studying zoology, had this degree, went to Japan, had this other kind of philosophy. Luckily in our country, we had this amazing philosopher that's actually defined the technology age and talked about communications, and that's a fellow that you probably all heard about called Marshall McLuhan. And Marshall McLuhan was this big star for all of us, and he came to, we did lectures about him in Vancouver and functions, and I was involved in the giant happening about his career and his ideas, and I did the visual arts section of this big happening. So Marshall McLuhan became this other major influence in my life, which I feel very lucky now because it gave me an insight into looking at the art world as information. And we were becoming, you know, very involved in the information age, as we all know now. And at the same time, it was interesting to try to you know, see how you can make art that was about information and all these things. And the other, I taught at UBC in '64, University of British Columbia, and a new university started named Simon Fraser University, across town, and I ended up getting a job there to start the visual arts department. And the unique thing about this department was that it was called the Center for Arts and Communications. So we spent 2 or 3 years sitting down with dancers, musicians, theater people, and comm studies intellectuals and practitioners, and we tried to figure out what we were doing. So the multimedia interdisciplinary aspects were important, and at that time it helped form a lot of my ideas about information and art. So there's another piece here with a cirrus cloud, carrying case, and an umbilical cord and moon. And at the same time, because I always look back on my career now and I feel it was kind of interesting that I didn't go to art school, because I ended up going through these other knowledge bases but falling into art. So I came to art with a different sensibility. And you know, the whole pop art had happened and things, but I was interested in finding a new way to do things. So I ended up wondering if you could, you know, maybe we were kind of living, and we do live, in a major capitalist corporate world. So I thought, what if an artist had a little company as a found object? You know, like Duchamp with the urinal. I thought maybe you could take this kind of fantasy, this company structure, and work inside of it as an idea, and then work that out through the society. So I just, you're trying to find a name, and I'm kind of wanting to call myself a maximalist now, not a minimalist, but that's the kind of way that I function and work. So I ended up, and I guess it's something that I'm not a writer, but I love playing with language, because I like language in this kind of poetic way, and how you can switch things around and look at it in different ways and play with different words. So my own name has, when you say Ian, it's like E-N, and I was trying to find a thing that would work with anything, right? And so N-E, thing, because J.C. Penney, and there's all these different companies that have initials, and so that's kind of how the Anything Company evolved as a concept. So founding the Anything Company allowed me to work in this very kind of different way in these different areas. And another really, well, I'm just trying to riff off a bunch of things here, but one of the other important ingredients in my life has been when I worked in southern Idaho, I used the camera as a documentary tool, and it's always been a part of my life to photograph things. So during all this period and up until today, I used cameras as a main way to study my environment and look at it, and to take pictures that I feel are important and things like that. So you will see that as we go along. So anyways, this particular piece was on the cover of Art in America back in '69, because I sent the slides to the museum, and the man liked it so much that he wanted to claim it as the cover. So that's how that piece happened. Just excuse me a minute, I'm gonna get a drink. And let's see. And then in '69, a fortunate thing, you never know how all these things happen, but the National Gallery in Canada decided to ask me if I would do an exhibition called the Anything Company in the National Gallery. And the National Gallery at that time was in a big corporate building. So I rearranged the building and worked with all their employees, and we established a whole corporate office down in the bottom floor as you went into the museum, and changed a lot of the features in there. There was a president's office and all these things. And these are the tables where the secretaries from the government pool would come and work in there during the week. It was on for a month. And some people actually came to the gallery and they had to go back outside because they thought they were in the wrong building. It was a kind of major big performance installation piece. This is a photograph I've taken. It's kind of philosophy, one of the philosophies of my life, which is that life is just a blur. So I actually, a lot of photographs that I've taken, I don't mind if they're blurry or whatever. And there's a work that I've done that's just the word blur, because I think that's kind of how a lot of stuff that we know and do and think is kind of like that. But it's also really important, and it's okay to be blurry. The mirror has been an important part of my whole career, and the mirrors happened, I think, when I look back through going out into hiking in nature, you know, seeing reflections in ponds and things. And it's just, you know, we all look in mirrors, of course, and it's become a thing. And I like it because, you know, obviously McLuhan talked about looking at society in your rear view mirror, and anyway, so I ended up using the mirror a lot, and I still do it today. But I've now put an and in the mirror, so I'm not sure if I have that, but I can talk to you about that. So this is a giant kind of, it's a very curious project. It was, we have, as all countries have taxation centers, and there's one in Vancouver in a place called Surrey, and they thought if they put art in the building, the employees would be happier. So they invited some of us artists to make projects. So I suggested I would use the employees and go around the city of Vancouver and make reflections of it, and then we would put all these things back in there. So it's called Reflections of Vancouver. So it's a giant kind of backlit transparency. And I actually, quite early on made transparencies, which you'll see upstairs in light boxes, and a lot of that happened, gosh, when one's career at a time, talk about it fast, it's so hard, I forget. I did a Master of Fine Arts at Washington State University, which is only 9 miles from the University of Idaho. And just to backtrack, I went there and I told them, like, I don't have this art degree, but I have a degree in zoology, and I've been exhibiting on my own, and I went to Japan, and would you guys accept me in a Master of Fine Arts? And to their credit, they said, okay, you can come here and be an artist. So I went there, and I actually, they said, but you have this problem, you didn't have any art history and slides. So I said, for that, you're gonna have to put away the slides for 2 years, and you have to go to all the art historians' lectures and present all these things and listen to them. So it was the best thing that could have ever happened. So I spent quite a few years doing this, that we've all done. And I think through that, it gave me this idea of the luminosity of looking at transparencies. And so in '68 and '9, I decided, I wanted to make some bigger works from my photography. So I went and decided to find a place where you could make transparencies. Because as all artists, which I'm sure they'll all admit, you look at the advertising world, like we look at lots of different worlds, and the ad world is always doing stuff, and airports were starting to use big transparencies. And so I decided, and I made some small transparencies, and they were actually in that show in the National Gallery. So I ended up with the master's in painting, but for me, painting is this so-called very broad subject. It's like painting about everything, if you want. So let's see, we're just jumping through a number, because I can't show you all the different works, but what's been a big burning issue for me has been ecology all my life, and then I've started, because of all the environmental movements and our concern with global warming and David Suzuki and Al Gore and all these things that are going on, in my small way, I'm trying to make some works that are about this. And up in the show, you'll see a couple of works about that, but there's been a lot of other ones I've done. I'm going to show you a few. This is called CO2 Landscape. I don't know, I'm a peripatetic investigator of secondhand stores forever. And so when you go as an artist into all the flotsam and jetsam, you find objects and things. And I found this very big thermometer one day, which is about this high. And it sat around for a couple of years, and eventually it became this thing in this landscape. I thought it would be a way to, like you do a roast, and you check the temperature. So this is called CO2 Landscape. It has, little fake fireplaces that burn to suggest heat and all the things that happen, as well as it's a homage to a very famous rubber worker, South America, that was murdered for his effort to organize people. His name was Chico Mendez. So there's a little picture of him down in the corner there. He was murdered because I don't know, the theory was because all the people that were raising all the cattle weren't too happy about all this. So a number of big works working with stuffed animals, because the major looking at animals has been part of my whole life, and this grew into work that's called trophies, because we have this kind of penchant for wanting to like shoot things and then we make a trophy, right? And so I thought, well, there might be this way to focus on this. So it's 10 foot in diameter, but in one of the sections there's a mirror and there's a clock, and the word says, "You are here." So when you're standing there, you see your own head in there, and it's a kind of an attempt to say, if society's not careful, that's where ours will be as well. And another work is when you spend a lot of time in Home Depot and all those different stores, I couldn't believe this killing stuff that we use to kill all the animals that we still live with, and the flies and the spiders and everything are all part of our Gaia, our kind of our humanity and everything is wrapped together. And so I wanted to make a statement. So this is called a killer still life. And it's totally all these products that are just absurd, like that we want to kill everything. I don't know why we can't just learn to live with all this stuff. And that's why the Eastern people and the Eastern philosophy is kind of nice, because there is this attempt to try to know that you're a part of this big web of life, and to just kind of enjoy it, right? Enjoy scratching the mosquito bites or whatever. This is another big work that was, one day it occurred to me that I saw the atomic bomb, and I realized, well, it's really the brain stem and the brains, like, right? And so I made this big piece. It's called A Final Message. It's hung on the wall with butcher knives, and the lights flash every 7 seconds. And there's a knife through the angel. This angel is a mechanical angel from Christmas that kind of moves. But it, for me anyways, it's called A Final Message, because the angels are so-called messengers. So I've been just doing a number of big pieces like this over the years. This is a piece with my wife, Louise Chance Baxter, that maybe you've met there. And when we met in '83, apartheid was happening. We decided to do a major piece just called A Final Message, or A Final Answer, that's right. And one of the answers that we thought was, if people interracially marry, then the world will be a better place, because we're not going to have all these prejudices that move so much. So this is a big piece of South Africa and so on happening in late 80s. During all that apartheid issues. Another big technology piece, which kind of relates to art by telephone, is a piece I did, which is called Techno Compost. So it's a giant, a big bin that's just filled with old throwaway technology that we all do. I mean, almost we change our cell phones every year or something, right? But this is filled with hair dryers and toasters and a bunch of things. And it was set up that a lot of the people in the city of Windsor and at a moment in Windsor, it was an amazing thing. The gallery went to a mall for 2 or 3 years while they rebuilt it, which was actually quite great, because it had all this audience that came by. And so the people brought stuff there, and we put it in so the compost grew. Another big painting of mine is one about it's just called Landscape, this piece, and it's a TV set that's embedded in a giant painting, and you can sit and change channels there if you wish to watch it, kind of. Another work that I did was about food. I had a heart attack when I was, I don't know, 48 or something, and I forgot what year now. But anyways, I started really thinking about the food that we eat, so I made a whole exhibition about all the bad food that we should think about, right? And it was a big installation show, and this is Wonder Bread. This piece is just called Wonder. And the people are burnt out and they're laying on the floor there, right? And there was a whole bunch of things with wieners and salt and sugar and a whole number of things like that. And then in '92, Louise actually, she came from Trinidad to Canada, as almost everybody in North America has come from somewhere. And she was amazed at the size of our country, and she'd never really been across it, so we decided to videotape the entire highway from St. John's, Newfoundland, all the way to Vancouver Island. It took 2 weeks, but we had a big camera and we videotaped all the highway with 2-hour tapes at that point in time with video. And it has dialogue and radio and music, and it was a year in Canada's year when Quebec wanted to, succeed, leave. And so we thought we'd better do it before there's no more Canada. And the way you view this, I was hoping it would come here, but it didn't. But it will be shown in Toronto and maybe somewhere else. But it's projected on the windshield of a vehicle, and there's a schedule, and you can go and watch whenever you like to see the landscape at certain points. There is an amazing point to go, and when you watch this, and it's just as it leaves Calgary and it goes to Banff, you go through this amazing transition of all of a sudden you're in the mountains. And, so anyways, it's an interesting piece because it measures a continent and it gives you a whole idea of what it's like, how much of our lives we spend looking through the frame of reference of the windows of a vehicle. That's how we see everything. And there's a few other works upstairs that kind of relate to this thinking about using a car. Let's see what we got. This was a whole exhibition done in Windsor about breast cancer. So my idea was to put books about breast cancer between breasts, because breasts are like bookends, and they hold them. And to my surprise, all the health industry loved it so much they used it in all their brochures. Because I like to do things that are just very direct and simple. This is a major work in the National Gallery. It's called Animal Preserve. It's 500 bottles of the stuffed animals that we all cherish and that sit on our beds and everything, but they're all submerged in distilled water. There's 500 bottles and they're all on these shelves like that. And this is a work called Skewered. So a lot of these works are all about these issues, about environmental and animal extinction and so on. So they're just all slipped on a giant skewer. This is a work I did a few years ago because I saw what was happening. It's like what's going on all the time. And we're trying to deal with, and Occupy Wall Street is all about this and so on. What happened in my life about 8 or 10 years ago, I started, because I like to play with language, and I ended up realizing that the word "and" is a pretty neat word. So because I'm always thinking about philosophy and why we are here, and because of all that. I had a quad operation, and when you go through life, you start wondering about everything. So "and" became an important thing because, and now I've seen all you guys, and I'll meet some of you. So "and" is always happening. So I thought I'd really like to have it become a part of my life. So I changed my name. I went to the Ontario government and in Canada, and I said I want my name to be Ian Baxter and. So they said okay. So I did that. So I tattooed the "and" on my hand because the word "hand" has an "and" in it. And it also is a kind of signal because our hands are always touching other things that are about "and." I'll get this bottle and I'll have a drink. And I'll put it back. And so it's a way for me to keep playing and doing things because I love to kind of play but look at philosophy at the same time. And so to do, well, obviously I'm going to, I've played around with all those inflated things, so I decided to make this big "and." And this piece is just called "ands," the word A-N-D-S, "ands." So what it does, it has a motor, and in 3 or 4 minutes it deflates, and then it comes back up. And so it's always going on like that, right? And then I've been doing quite a work in Europe, and this is a big ampersand that's out in a big field that was part of a sculptural project. A recent work that I just did was it was for Deutsche Bank, part of their calendar, but I wanted to make a piece that was about what's happening, and so it's called "Our World Needs a Green Sweep." And it's just one of those little brooms, and it was my way to say, hey, we have to, we're all thinking about that anyways, right? And all the stuff we do with recycling and everything. And then this is a recent piece from about 3 or 4 years ago. I've taught all my life at UBC, Simon Fraser, York University, and various universities in the States and Europe, but I really enjoy teaching. It's a part of I feel as an artist to kind of work, get other people into this thing. And I know in my career, if I could get there coming from where I did, that if I meet the plumber or somebody, I can kind of turn people on to seeing all these possibilities and to kind of have another quality in their life. And so one of the things that occurred was I just thought one day I'd like to do a piece about a lecture. So all these chairs have shoes. There's 48 chairs. It's just called The Lecture. And in a way it goes back to Socrates maybe. I mean, they had to sit on some rocks, which were the first chairs. And they all have 2 pairs of the same shoes. And this particular piece, when it's exhibited, during the tenure of the exhibition, the city or wherever it is, they invite one person to give a very special lecture, and they can sell the chairs for a good cause or whatever they want to do. And that lecture stays with this piece through the history. So it already has one lecture by a friend of mine in Calgary, who actually is a biology professor, and he talked about environmental issues. This is a big fantasy thing I want to do. It requires federal, provincial, or state private money, but it's a giant park, which would have picnic grounds and everything, and reflecting pools, but about a 300-foot-high stainless steel 0 and 1, because zeros and ones are what run the world right now, and it's kind of our DNA of our information age. So it would be this place, but it also has a big learning center there about digital learning and about Facebook and Twitter and how they all work. And so it's and partly it would be a homage to one of my heroes, which is Marshall McLuhan, because we could talk about his ideas. So that's a thing that I'm looking for a promoter, and we'll start to make it. I've been working on some new works right now that are about conversion, because what's really interesting, everything that we take with our little digital cameras is about, you know, zeros and ones are what bring everything together. So I've been doing some artwork, and this particular piece is actually titled Landscape with Sailboats. And when you plug that in a conversion table, you get exactly all those zeros and ones. So I had them routed out, and then I painted a landscape on top of it. And you'll see that upstairs. But it's a series that I'm working on, a lot of that. I did a big exhibition in France a couple of years ago with a biennial in the city of Rennes, where they actually, it's really neat. They invented a new biennial because people are trying to find ways to bring tourists, and this biennial hooks artists with companies, which was a neat idea. So I was given to be involved with the biggest sandwich company in France. And so I went to their factory and I thought about what I could do with bread and everything. And anyways, I had a bread place make me a giant baguette that I fell asleep on. And then I planted a whole baguette garden. It was a part of my works there. And then another really important project happened in 2010 in Toronto. It became called the Eco Art Van. It involved 10,000 students in the schools of Toronto. And we went around with a van that has inside of it my artwork that deals with ecological things. And it's a special advertising van that you can rent. And so this went for 2 months. It went through a lot of schools. And it parked on the school grounds, and the kids came out, and then there was a whole teaching component that the organization called Number 9 set up, and it was very successful, and we had a great time with it. I'll show you a little video of it here. This is one of the pieces you'll see upstairs. It's called Zero Emissions, and we all know what that's about, because all the car industry is trying to come to some resolution about less emissions. And so I thought I'll make this big muffler piece, pinch off all the mufflers, put stuffed taxidermied animals on top to suggest if we're not careful, they'll all be dead, or if we are careful, they'll have a new life as well as ourselves. Just another work just called A Pile of Ants. This is a work that I think I handed you out something. I'm working with a young guy, and we're pretty excited because we're working on what's called, the catalog raisonné. If you're in the art world, you know how they do a raisonné of an artist's work. But we're working on an electronic one, so it's called a catalog raisonné E, a little bit like the E on the knowledge thing. And we want to, so we're inviting people to come in and write, and we're pulling together my career by scanning it all and everything. So it's just been going for a couple of years now. So feel free to go look at it.
Suppose you were the president of one of the largest breweries in North America, and suppose you went looking for some new business ideas. After you'd checked all the way up the corporate ladder, where would you go next? Well, the president of LaVette decided he had the answer. He hired an artist. Why an artist?
I'm working at LaVette. I worked as a creative consultant at
The man he hired was conceptual artist IAIN Baxter. During a casual dinner conversation, Baxter told Sidney Olin, LaVette's president, about his interest in corporate business, and along the way revealed that he had a thought process not quite like anyone else's. Olin was intrigued. With his bicycle clips, tweedy look, and office artifacts, Baxter's not what you'd expect in the corporate executive mold. He once put his kids in a box and held an art gallery showing of them. But it seemed that he might be the one to give a new slant to the corporate line of thought. How did this job come about for you?
Well, I met Sid Olin at a dinner party about a year and a half ago, and we were talking. I've always wanted to have the challenge of working in a major corporation, so I just said to him, why don't you hire a fellow like me and have a person in here? So he said, okay, we'll take it on and do it. So it finally happened.
Some might consider Sidney Olin's move as temporary business insanity, but he explains his plan.
And I had been thinking of ways for some time to inject some lateral thinking, whatever buzzwords you want to use, some different types of thinking as opposed to formal logical thought into our business process with a view to breaking new ground, opening up new ideas, that kind of thing. And we started talking about it, and I wondered if having a guy with as I say, a thought process quite unlike others around for a good deal of the time might not only that he would bring ideas perhaps into the company, but that being around him might generate new ideas in other people.
How would you define your role?
Well, the role is more as a catalyst. It's just nuancing questions and people coming in and saying, hey, Ian, here's something, look at this. And what do you think about that? So it's a processing situation. And I find that best for me because I'm somebody that likes to float around and talk to a lot of different people. So it took a while because people were a little uneasy at first, but as they got to know me, they felt good about it and they'd start talking to me.
One tangible result of those informal conversations with Baxter is LaVette's Please Don't Drink and Drive campaign. It's quite a departure from the usual approach to ads, and if successful, may open the door for more off-the-wall consultants who haven't come up through the ranks. In England, a trend has started. Some companies hire people like Monty Python's John Cleese to pump some creative insanity into their business.
Please don't drink and drive.
We spoke with radio personality and business analyst Jerry White, who wholeheartedly supports this move to non-traditional resources.
Is it valid? Does he have a position within a corporation? Is he doing some good for LaVette's?
I think it's an immensely powerful concept for the company. I think they're doing themselves a lot of good having a person like that. Organizations become very stifled and bureaucratic and totally lacking in innovation after a while, and nobody's prepared to take a risk. So you bring in a loony or an iconoclast, a troublemaker, and he acts like a catalyst. He gets everybody excited, and they have to come up with innovative ideas, and it won't work for a long period of time. It probably will only work for a year, but still it's going to have a very positive impact on that company, and I think it's working.
Does he come in as a threat to force people to produce?
Well, he forces them to break the mold. They can't just be yes men, they can't just be the organizational man and whatever. They've got to come up with brilliant new ideas because this guy is around them. And maybe it's a threat, maybe it's just a motivator, but whatever it does, it seems to work.
Is this really a marriage of business and art?
Well, I think there's a great deal of art already in business, except most of us don't understand it or don't notice it around us. There's tremendous creativity and craftsmanship in so much of what is done. I think he's just forcing them to recognize it in a more tangible way. They're going to become much more conscious of the exciting parts of their business because of a person like him being around them. And I think they'll be much more innovative because, you know, an artist tends to bring out the artists in all of us. You know, we all want to be like the artist because they have such a unique element and character to them.
Do you think that Sidney Olin showed a lot of foresight in hiring Ian Baxter?
Well, I think the Olin family has had a long history of being sort of innovative entrepreneurial yahoos in Canadian business. I think that this opportunity was the type of thing that he would go for, and I think anybody who's worked for LaVette's or worked for Mr. Olin know that he's a guy that takes the chance. And that's one of the reasons why the company has performed so well over the past few years with his leadership.
Hiring an artist was a risk for LaVette's, and it's too soon to tell if it's a success story worth repeating. Up to now, both sides seem pleased that the status quo is being shaken up. So far, Ian Baxter's appetite for new ideas and experiences keeps both the executive and the artist in him satisfied. Is that the Golden Gate Bridge?
I guess I've been called a corporate iconoclast. That word has a kind of a nasty thing saying it's a breaker of image, but I think it's a maker of new images. So I would like to think that it's a new viable process and a new way that people can employ people with ideas like myself and dancers and musicians and poets. And I hope that that's going to happen. I feel it will.
And Jerry White thinks it will too.
What is Ian's biggest contribution?
His biggest contribution is the innovative approach to thinking. And he stimulates new ideas, he stimulates creativity, and the marketplace today is demanding innovation, real innovation. You can't just put a label on a product and say, new, improved. It's got to be a major step forward. And he's the type of person that can motivate the people around him to do that. I think that's his major role.
We're here at Willow Park Elementary School with the Ian Baxter and Eco Art Van. This is the artist. This is Ian Baxter.
Yeah, it's a real, you've seen a raccoon? That's a raccoon. Yeah. I have a degree in zoology way back in the 50s. And working with animals and habitats and everything has been an ongoing concern all these years. In this particular work, they're in distilled water and they look very humorous at the same time. There's a very sad quality to it, because that's maybe how we will really look at the animals in our world.
Really, this is about stimulating their imagination, tapping into their curiosity, and getting them excited both about art, but also about animal preservation.
Okay, guys, so what's the title of the piece?
Extinction.
And then what's on the end of that word, extinction?
Question mark.
Okay, and then why do you think Ian Baxter added the question mark?
Because they're not extinct, because they're not extinct yet, but maybe in the future they might be extinct.
We particularly wanted to deal with the grade 4 class because with the Toronto District School Board curriculum, they're working on animal habitat. So we wanted to tie into what the teachers were already working with their students on.
Thank you for adopting me. You're welcome.
So animal habitat, right? When artists do pictures or depictions of animal habitat, do you know what this is called? It's called a landscape. We're going to do some wordplay. We're going to change the L to an H, and we're going to make handscapes. So you're going to use your hands. You're going to first put it on your page, and your hand is going to represent you as connected to your animal's habitat and caring for your animal's habitat.
Are you thinking about what your hands are going to represent?
About a couple of years ago, I did a piece called "Our World Needs a Green Sweep." We're calling the kids that grew out of this the green sweepers, because we really need this kind of generation to be the ones that really make the greenness happen through our whole world.
What do you think? Okay, bring your arms down. Okay, are you ready?
So we are trying to introduce the students to the idea that they can actually play a role in preserving animal habitat.
What's your green pledge?
I'll pledge I'll never eat meat anymore.
Excellent.
Fish
Okay.
meat, actually.
Perfect. And do you have a green pledge?
Yep. Oh, I promise when I grow up, I will save caribous.
Awesome. Okay, smiling at the camera. Excellent. Good job. Looking here at my camera. Excellent.
Not to drive cars a lot because pollution spreads around.
One more big smile. Perfect.
We want to
The
stimulate
World Wildlife
these
came on
kids.
board
We
and
wanna
gave all
turn
these
them on to art.
kids all
Some
these
of those
animals.
kids out there are really creative minds just waiting to have an opportunity to explode. And that's what we want to capture.
My animal's a snow leopard, and what inspired me was hunting. So I put no hunting. This is a picture of the mountains when global warming is happening. The mountains are kind of falling apart, and the ice is breaking.
This is the blue shark. The pollution is pouring down on him, so he doesn't have nowhere to go, and he'll just die in the process. So we need to help him, and we need to don't let him extinct. Please help him.
The total package of the Eco Art Van was something that I was really excited about, and then to top it off, I realized that it was really important to put a handle on top. And so it has a little handle, so the handle kind of sums up this whole thing. You can carry all these ideas with you and go out into society and do something. And so you'll notice that it has this handle. So it's a container to carry their ideas with them into the future.
They say that artists are tortured, but that's hard to believe of Ian Baxter. He says the three most important words to live by are play, wonder, and love. And his words and his work have also made him influential in the Canadian art world since the 1960s. Right now, as part of a cross-Canada tour, his photography is on display at the Art Gallery of Greater Victoria. Here's a portrait of the artist who finds art in the everyday.
If I had to sit down and tell somebody who Ian Baxter was, I think I'd have to say, have you got an hour?
He was constantly challenging and trying to redefine art and ask the questions, what is art? That really is essentially Ian, and it never stops.
Life with Ian is very interesting. It's always on the go. You never know when something will come up. It might be 2 in the morning and you might be taking a trip that very day.
When you look at Ian Baxter's almost 50-year career as an artist, no matter where you look, you have a consistent sense of his radicality and a very sort of shrewd and ingenious way of thinking about art outside the traditional framework of the moment.
He actually makes art fun, and there aren't many artists that do that.
Ian Baxter and what?
I decided that and is a very important word in our everyday activities, and I like the idea of having it in my name, because I'm always coming up with another and, or I meet another person and something happens. So and for me became a really nice way to say exactly what I'm about. So I legally put it into my name. So it's Ian Baxter and. That's sweet. Oh, there's love in your eyes.
The cross between Ian as a person and Ian as an artist, there's almost a line that you actually can't see because it's one and the same. Ian lives his life as art.
I wanted to meet somebody totally outside of my normal field of reference, so I ran a companion ad. And I ran it in Toronto Star in 1983. Louise's middle name and maiden name is Chance, and that's what's happened. I took a chance, and the chance worked out, and basically that's what my whole life in art is all about, is taking chances. Then did it work?
Yes.
Okay.
It did.
Thank you.
Art is all over. Ian Baxter made that statement in the middle 60s. Art is all over. Does that mean art is everywhere and art is everything, or does it mean art is finished? There is no more art.
I'm very interested in the play of words itself, and so sometimes just a very simple way that you talk about something has a very powerful meaning.
One reading of the art world is that it is a pretentious, highly constructed realm full of artificial people, and I very much like this button that I'm wearing. It's almost as if this button was made for people like me, because I am an art official, someone who works at the Art Gallery of Ontario, and I love the fact that Ian is reminding me that there is an artificiality to to my work.
But he also was absolutely brilliant in developing a corporate persona, the Anything Company. It was sort of a spoof, and yet a kind of a critical analysis of, or perception of, the corporate world.
I've set up a company. It's called the Anything Company, and it's going to be incorporated as a national company. I like the idea of the artist's name not being that involved.
We live in a corporate world, and so I thought I would have a corporation, my own special corporation, and the Anything Company became a way of playing with language and at the same time saying anything. It allowed me to work with anything and in any way that I wanted. I did run some ads on CBC, and when I phoned the CBC to run an ad, they would say, well, who was the organization? I'd say, well, it's the Anything Company, and we're a consulting firm. So if you just say consulting firm, you can pretty much do anything. And I did anything, and Anything Company as a result.
But Ian had that way of both spoofing and being serious about and making us think about what corporations do. And in fact, LaVette hired him for a year to give advice to their executives.
So he actually, as an artist, went to work every day at the corporation and advised LaVette on aesthetic issues of how their brand, how their product appeared in the world visually. And he did that not because he wanted to have a day job and a regular job, but he did that as an artist.
The main thing in our lives is that we actually live in a landscape, but it's a landscape of information, a landscape of geography, it's a landscape of commodities, it's a landscape of emotions, it's a landscape of politics. You actually live in a landscape, and you yourself are a piece of the landscape. Basically, that's all we all are doing. These photographs are actually like a record of my travels, in a sense. Bartley Mowat says we all have our territories like the wolves do. We know the wolves always urinate when they go places to show where they've been. Well, this, in a sense, is kind of like the territorial thing like wolves do, but humans have their territorial patterns. And this is my territorial pattern. And along the way, I'm always using the camera because it was a tool that I got very involved with as a young zoologist. And then as I moved into the area of art, it became a way of documenting my way of seeing things. In our lives, there's all kind of funny things that you see out there when you're traveling, and I particularly liked this work that's called Erection Shop. And then you have this crane that's actually in a certain pose that would suggest an erection. Well, this is the dynamic obsolescence sculpture yard. This is where all of the obsolescence is ground up, and I guess it goes back into other consumer products. Old television sets are dropped off and left in our society, and so I decided to pick them up and use them as a medium to express certain paintings that I wish to do. This one is very much about a river. It's like a river that's flowing, and the television pixels themselves give this a kind of animation. When it's turned on, they're totally activated as if they had an internal DNA in these images. And they also work when you shut them off. They have their own other quality, but when they're lit up and turned on, they come to life in a different way. And I find that very exciting because all the pixels and the, so to speak, snow that we used to talk about in the television becomes a part of the actual artwork itself.
The images are all of landscapes, and they're sort of electric landscapes. They're landscapes that are alive, that flicker with the light of television, and one thinks very much about you know, how do we index landscape today? Where can we, is there such a thing as a natural landscape?
You do? Yes, of course I do. Oh, you dear sweet man, give me a hug.
Perhaps he's making the question, which is, do we have to make a painting on the television screen in order to get anybody to look at it? Maybe that's what he means, that art is all over.
And what next? Well, of course, more ands. One and, another and I hope to keep on doing ands forever.
And if you want to see television works in the future, you may have a chance. It was recently purchased by the Art Gallery of Ontario for its collection. The photography exhibit that we mentioned earlier, called Passing Through, is in Victoria until October 14th. It will tour Calgary, Saskatoon, Halifax, and Charlottetown.
And that's what I do periodically at home to keep fluid. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Ian, for this very fluid tour through your production. Our time is very limited, so our discussion is going to be a little bit...
I always hate that they have to have time limits all the time, but anyways. If we can have a few minutes, and if you have some questions, that would be great.
Well, I would love to ask you a question.
Sure.
I realize the perhaps unintended effect of seeing this descriptive walk narration through your work it made me think of the kind of inverse of art by telephone, which is where you call to give instructions for how to make a work through the telephone, through technology. And here we're using technology as a way to communicate works already made. So I'm wondering, and I know many people in the audience are eager to know a little bit more about art and technology, art by telephone, and how that relates to this project of mediating and communicating experience that's so clearly informed your work over the past 50 years.
Yeah, well, I guess the Art by Telephone show was done by Jan Vandermark, who was one of the earlier directors here, and he pulled together a number of artists who were exciting people doing things and in the 60s, and we phoned in our ideas. What I did was, because you knew I was involved with McLuhan, I actually had a telex and a telecopier, which is a forerunner of a fax machine in my house. So I would send data, and they would just pin it on the wall. And Baldessari and different people.
What was the data that you were sending?
Well, I was interested in, I might send a phrase that said, this phrase is typed and sent by telex to this museum. But I also remember one that I loved is, with a telex machine you can set up different interesting ideas, and one was to punch the key 1 once, the key 2 twice, the key 3 times, all the way up to 10. So that actual work was just like getting darker as it went from one side to the other.
So in some ways that's very much like your landscape work that you're doing now with digital codes. Yeah. So the technology has changed a lot. We've moved from the telex to the digital binary codes, but the idea of that still generating a picture seems to be pertinent.
Yeah, because technology, I mean, we all live with it, with our can openers and our cell phones, and I mean, everybody now, if you look in our society, when you walk around, everybody's just looking down like this. It's kind of weird, like there's all these other new positions that are happening, but it's very exciting because it's ways to use this, and it was neat that this show happened in Chicago way back then about a piece of technology which we will never lose, which is the phone, but now it's just in a different form.
Do you imagine that the show would have the same kind of conceptual structure?
Well, actually, I think it would have today, and it'll probably be, it could be a neat show to redo, but using cell phones. But there is I noticed when Steve Jobs passed away, they were checking all kinds of people, and there's actually a film festival of just cell phone movies that's out of New York. So people are just making little movies on cell phones, and there's actually, it's really exciting time with all these new improvements. And well, you saw David Hockney recently had a whole exhibition on iPads.
Well, it's interesting. It occurs to me that it's a very different use of technology or relationship too, because what you're describing now is using technology to capture different kinds of images of our environment. And art by telephone and some of your earlier, I'm thinking in particular of the photographs with the Polaroids reflecting some environment back into the image. That's a little bit about how information gets mediated by that technology. Which I think is a fascinating idea, and so I'm wondering if you can think about how that kind of mediation structures the work that you were doing.
Well, you know, as you can tell, I'm very much excited about photography, but as like TV has become really a whole new way that we look at entertainment and news and you know, reality shows and everything. So I mean, in those earlier days, for me it was just another way of looking at this reality using photography. But as it gets reprocessed through television and other media, it comes out with different attitudes.
I noticed that there's some movement, and I'm sure that people have many questions. I like that you're already engaging a kind of interface of using technology to document.
Yeah, I always like to just check out.
People don't know this about Ian, but he usually wears his camera around his neck at all times. So he's always ready for that interface of technology and experience.
Well, I mean, that's a lot of time. Well, I mean, it's a good socially conscious thing when we find out. You know, it happens when police do not nice things. Fortunately, someone's there with their cell phone, right? So it's one way that we, you know, it's becoming more and more prevalent. We all are able to take pictures of things.
It makes me wonder if, and since I know people are moving, but if any of you have questions that you might want to pose to Ian.
Or you want to add something?
Or Ian, you know, is a big fan of the ampersand and the expansive logic, but you might also have questions about art and technology or about the relationship of technology and knowledge that's coursed through this body of work, as it also configures a pedagogic practice, a practice that is about the world that we live in and trying to think critically about how we view and construct that world. Please.
Yeah, just speak.
I have a question about corporations.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the interesting things that happens in 1968 is that you move from being a person to sort of posing yourself in the world as a corporation. And last year, you brought up Occupy Wall Street at one point during your talk.
Well, I think it's exciting that all that is opened up now in a good way, and who knows where that movement's going to go and what it will do, right? But it's exciting that it's out there and it's happening. But in terms of the corporations, I think it's going to make them rethink a lot about their positions, and I'm not sure exactly where it's going to go. I'm just interested in watching myself.
Do you mind even if I communicate an anecdote that you
Sure.
told me in the past few days, which was in response to anything and perhaps in about 1969, Ian mentioned to me that Carl Andre had sent him $1, and the dollar was intended or gestured as a dollar to found a foundation to make you stop your foundation. So that there was either a misunderstanding of a kind of Marxist critique at that moment, or a sort of one-upping of how to situate an artist's relationship to that kind of corporate structure.
I think it was in '69 or somewhere, but I know him and we were kind of friends and everything, but it was his way because he, featured himself as a worker, Marxist worker, I think, and but we all grow and go through all these phases of living with hypocrisy that we all do. I mean, we all do it, right? We can't escape what happens, and because finally you realize you have to make products and sell them and whatever, and but it's nice to have all that kind of neat history that happens and gestures.
I think another interesting example, and we spoke of this in the past few days as well, was the work that you and Louise did for the breast cancer awareness, that image gets picked up and circulated by the medical brochures, and it's not that you've sold them the image or you've licensed, et cetera, but that kind of fluidity between art's place and art's as knowledge and as idea and as an information, and also as a practice of visualization and aestheticization seems, as you point out here, very fluid in your work.
Well,
and that certainly you anticipated that in the 60s.
I'm still in the pool, am I? Oh, yeah. Good. I very well. You can probably tell I'm a kind of educator, artist guy. Like I like to turn people on to art, and it's been my way, and I enjoy teaching a lot, and so it's just a facet of me. I appreciate artists that are not interested in that, but it's just been something that I'm really quite devoted to and excited about, and I enjoy watching students get turned on and going in their lives in different ways, so it's always been great for me.
We do have to leave this room, and Maddie suggested, and I'm sure Ian would be very welcome to speaking with people about his work up in the galleries, if any of you are interested in joining. But perhaps we might take one question or comment if there's any
other
burning issue. I know it's always hard to pose a question after someone has just told you must leave a room, but if you choose to be that brave soul.
Take a parting shot.
Take a parting shot. It's an easy way to do that as well.
Yeah, hi. Why did you want to get your MFA? Well, I knew by then, after that Masters of Ed and everything, I knew I wanted to be this artist, and I knew it is the credential to get a teaching job, especially in those years. And so I did that, and I also knew it would be a great time for me to get into the kind of art school atmosphere. But what happened is, at the graduate school, I had the greatest the greatest learning experience with one of my most favorite. He's really important. You may not know him, but you should know this artist. His name is Galen Hansen, and he's based in Washington, but he's about 90 right now. But he is an amazing painter, and he has his paintings have a spirit of Guston's later work. But Galen and I ended up, he was the prof and I was the student, and we ended up like throwing that idea out the window, and we just shared our ideas together. And that's been kind of one of my philosophies. But check his name out. It's Gaylen Hansen. And you will find his work, it's very exciting and unusual. He puts himself in his paintings as the Colonel, and it's spelled with a K, and he sits inside with grasshoppers, and he's a really amazing American artist, and he should be seen more in the East, I think.
I think that I'll close by pointing out that you, Ian, also put yourself in your work in a way that is also still perhaps very McLuhan-esque. You are dressed in your logoed ampersand and a trademark phrase that you've also shown me images of rendered digitally. And so I encourage you all to take advantage of this opportunity to engage a artwork, a walking, living artwork, as well as important thinker and contributor to a very serious progression of ideas in our time. So thank you all for coming, and thank you, Ian.
Thank you.